Good morrow, folks. I hope everything's going well wherever you are in the world. It is time for some more hobby nightmares. Fantastic. And we start today with Alan. We have two role-playing ones today. We've not had any of these for quite a while, and both of them are doozies. Let's jump in, shall we, with Alan, who has responded to Monday's Hobby Nightmare, which is awesome. I love it when we get ones like this. So if you ever want to respond to a Hobby Nightmare, like if something ever jolts free an idea in your head, like, oh, wow, yeah, no, that happened to me a few years ago, right? Something similar, always write it in. It'd be really, really cool to get your perspective on a Hobby Nightmare that's just gone by. Because not only is it really cool to get your opinion, but we keep it fresh in people's minds, and Alan has done exactly that by writing in to respond to a Hobby Nightmare that I read out on Monday, because he had a similar experience a few years ago. So let's jump in, shall we? With Alan, he says, "Hey North, I just wanted to chime in on Monday's Hobby Nightmare. Depending on when you read this out, that is, it could be weeks ago by now. No, I'm going to try and keep these very succinct and on the same week whenever I get them in. In that one on Monday, you mentioned that you had a hard time believing that these people actually exist. The over-the-top, blue-haired, constantly entitled and offended people, I mean, like Morris." Yeah, I did. I mentioned that. Mainly because a lot of the time in Hobby Nightmares, I get like caricatures of people read out to me. Not read out to me, sent in to me, right? And sometimes I have a hard time believing it, mainly because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I like to make sure that I'm optimistic about who people are. But at the same time, the more I read these things out, the more I see in my own hobby life, the more I'm like, yeah, actually, these people, yeah, they're out there. Do you know what I mean? Alan says, "Well, they do exist. I am what most people, myself, would describe as a far-left person, or libtard, as my brother calls me. In jest, we take the piss out of each other all the time. It's all good fun. I am a die-in-the-wall Democrat with all the baggage that apparently brings, even if I find these people insufferable. There was a Hobby Nightmare back in the day about a Vampire the Masquerade player who didn't want to drink blood and considered that a no-go in sessions. I've had a similar experience, but it came from a player called Bob, for his anonymity, and it was about killing and violence. My storyteller, the Vampire the Masquerade version of a GM, or DM, Mark, made the very stupid mistake of allowing people to use lines and veils in the session 0, something I will let you explain. Yeah, never do that. Never, ever do that. A line and veil, for those of you who don't know, it's basically, before you start a role-playing game, you say to your players, hey guys, do you have anything that you don't want me to cover, right? Is there anything that's beyond the pale that you don't want me to cover that's a bit too far for you and it'll make you feel really uncomfortable, you know? Now, that sounds innocent enough, and a lot of you will be going, what's wrong with that? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with that. People take advantage of it, people take the mick out of it, and you end up grinding the game to a halt every single time. I'm going to be honest with you here. If the gaming group that you're in requires you to do lines and veils, to not do any stupid nonsense that's going to offend people, you probably shouldn't be playing at that table. You need to go play at a table with actual adults who know how to act like adults, right? Any table that requires lines and veils or cards that they hold up going, this is too much for me, right? Don't play at that table, because at the end of the day, you're either playing it with utter snowflakes who are going to ruin your good time, or you're playing it with weirdos who have done weird things that offend people so much at the tabletop that they actually have to have lines and veils in their games and be treated like toddlers, right? Don't do it. As a GM, Dungeon Master, whatever, don't do this. You're going to tank your own game, alright? Cool. It turns out that Bob demanded that we not conduct any violence on camera, quote unquote, as in, we cut away when violence happens to another part of the story, and that we go out of our way to not kill anyone. We are vampires, by the way, anarch vampires, and most of us are Bruja. Yes, most of us are violent lefty punks, yeah. Bruja, basically Vampire the Masquerade, yeah, that's what they are. We are the punchy and violent vampires. But now we cannot do so in the session without Bob sighing, ranting, and throwing a black card onto the table. This black card meant that we needed to stop the scene immediately and move on because it was getting a little bit too much for whoever threw the card onto the table. We all had one, and only Bob used his, and he used it constantly. He would throw it onto the table for something as little as punching somebody in the face. In-game, of course. Grinding the sessions to a halt, and forcing the storyteller to scramble to another scene. I left after the second session. Watching my lefty friends placate this absolute idiot just made my stomach turn. So yes, North, they are out there. They live among us. Thanks for all you do, Alan. Well, I stand corrected, because this is not the first time I've gotten an email like this. I just thought it was really poignant to read it out today, of all days. So yeah, maybe I stand corrected. Maybe, you know, these guys do live out there. And a lot of the comments on that video bear that up as well. People sharing their own experiences about folks who are, shall we say, probably too fragile of mind to be doing role-playing in any shape or form, actually ruining the good time for everybody else. So, yeah. Again, I will say it for the last time. If your GM, DM, storyteller, dungeon master, whatever he is, referee, if he says to you, he or she says to you, does anybody have any lines or veils? You should probably take a swift step back from that table and examine the people in the room. If any of them look like the kind of people who are going to, you know, tie up NPCs and do nasty things to them, and you know what kind of things I mean, right? If any of them seem like they're going to be that kind of a person, leave the table straight away. That is a big red flag for me. If you say, let's do some lines and veils, I'm like, whoa, why do you need them? Why do you need them? Right? Is there any reason why you need them? And if they say no, then I'm probably walking anyway. I'm probably going, well, you know, all you're doing is you're giving your players tantamount carte blanche to basically stop the game whenever something that happens that they don't like. That's not role-playing, dude. Roll with the punches, grow a pair, be an adult, moving on. Right, our next hobby nightmare comes from Rob. How's it going, Rob? And he says, Howdy North. Your last video knocked loose an old hobby nightmare from my noggin, and you mentioning that your bag was low made me think you would appreciate it. Yeah, I bumped this one up, because I read it last night, and I thought it was actually pretty cool. So I'm going to read it out now, because I love Shadowrun. I have to say, North likes Shadowrun, so whenever I get a Shadowrun hobby nightmare, I'm always getting on it. So, this was an online Shadowrun game from a while ago, back when there was a more active and pronounced online Shadowrun community. Has it gone somewhere? Shadowrun players, has your game gone? Does nobody play it online anymore? One of the game masters there offered to run a series of games. It was a series of missions called Shadowrun Missions. Basically, the official main quest of the Shadowrun games with a healthy helping of the GM's own original runs that he was testing, since he was nervous about designing his own runs from scratch. That's a very clever thing to do. That's a really clever thing to do. I'm guessing, is this the Shadowrun video game storylines that he's doing? If so, that's really clever. Using that as a framework, that's really, really clever. Absolutely. You can also see if your own content is matching up to the original Shadowrun content, and if it is, and people don't actually, you know, pick it out as, oh, this is not Shadowrun content. That's such a shot on the arm for you. You're like, wow, they didn't even tell. They couldn't tell between my content and the official content. That's so cool, man. Very good idea. The game master picked out about 7 other players, 8 in total, including myself. 9 with the GM. That's a big... Okay, that is a big group. That's a big group. I would probably say 5 is the most I would run. Especially online. Like, 5's the most I'd run. Absolutely. It was quite the table, and it included pretty much everybody I knew in the Shadowrun Discord, and a few others I did not. Unfortunately, one of the unfamiliar types became a massive problem, and had a larger problem with my character in the game. To explain a bit, the Game Master limited some qualities that we could take for our characters as to limit munchkinning and game-breaking nonsense from the poorly designed supplement books. While looking at the slimmed down options, I thought back to an element of the setting and came up with a shapeshifter. Not a magical shifter, a creature that exists in the setting, nor a changeling, but somebody from the shapeshifter subculture, like a goth or a hippie. In Shadowrun, you can get rather extreme cosmetic biomodding surgery for dirt cheap in record time. The books even use an example of being able to get retrogenetic level sex and race changes as walk-in operations at a clinic inside a mall in 10 minutes. Ugh. That sounds horrible. So I had a guy who would go in. I'm not saying it's horrible that you could do that. I'm saying it's horrible because, you know, there's got to be like some sort of horrible, shall we say, mishaps that go on there. So I had a guy who could go in every other week and change his race. Human, elf, dwarf, troll, orc. His sex and his ethnicity in random combinations. Just out of scientific curiosity to see what it's like to live as an Asian orc man or a black elf woman or something like that. Sometimes he would even get dream chips and gain the memories of those people like movies he could download, just to see multiple aspects of the human experience. In roleplay terms, this was very much an aloof, inhuman look at human behaviour, and mechanically, it satisfied a negative quality that cost me money periodically and explained a positive quality that made me harder to recognise or identify. That's a really cool character. That's a really cool character, because it has, like, mechanical benefits, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're losing your humanity because you're losing yourself in these delusions, right? You're actually losing your character to these, like, weird delusions that you're having. But also, it's really hard for anyone to pin you down as a culprit in anything because you'll just change your sex and your race and everything. In fact, it'd kind of be impossible unless somebody has your genetic coder down so they can, like, get your skin flakes or something, you know what I mean, on a scanner. You're pretty much foolproof there. That's pretty cool. It's got ups and downs, which we like. Prior to the game, a few of our characters basically chatted in the text channel meant to be an in-character runner bar where Shadowrunners hang out, and was our character's base of operations. However, that guy had a problem with this. They were a lot like Morris from your last Dark Heresy story. I've gotten good at detecting patterns, and just from their Discord profile and in voice chat, I could tell you exactly what they look like, where they were from, broadly how wealthy they were, and how prolonged their dragged-out sob story was before they mentioned any of it. They were appalled when my character, Chimera, what a name! Chimera is exactly the name you should... Yeah, dude, you can create cool characters, man. When my character, Chimera, introduced himself and reacted like I had just thrown a dead bird in his face. They were a bit of a trans weirdo who called me out for, and I quote, as this was so stupid I will never forget it, trivializing the trans experience. Before we go any further, when somebody calls somebody a trans weirdo, it doesn't mean being trans means you're a weirdo, right? Not in my mind, anyway. It means you're a weirdo who happens to be trans. It just so happens that a lot of the time, a lot of people who identify on this lens tend to act up in this way. I've said this before on the channel. I have trans friends, dude, and they don't act like this, right? And they find people who do act like this an absolute insult to who they are. You know, I've had a trans friend literally tell somebody else they're not trans before, right? That was interesting, right? This is a girl who transitioned from being a guy, hasn't had any of the operations or anything, but you wouldn't know. Like, you literally, I've introduced them to my male friends, and they've gone, wow, she's really hot. And I'm like, yeah, about that, right? So, and she's literally, like, gone out of her way to go, listen, you're really acting out here, right? You've got a beard, you're wearing male clothes, you've got eyeliner on, and you're calling yourself a woman. Dude, you're not trans. You're somebody who wants attention, right? She said that to people before. And I kind of agree with her, like, because, you know, I don't know, man. It just seems odd. It just seems odd to me. I know people are going to call me a bigot for saying that, but it just seems odd that these people are racing out of the woodwork now to claim an identity that probably isn't theirs. Because trans people go through a lot of shit, man. They go through a lot. You know, and a lot of them kind of feel like, at least from when I speak to them, they kind of feel like, listen, we fought for this for so long. How dare you come in now and masquerade as one of us just to get some attention? You know, it's not going to... You know, most of them will give you the time of day at the start, but as soon as... They're really good at recognizing people who aren't genuine, dude. They're so good at it. They're so good. As you would be, right? As you would be. You're so good at recognizing, listen, you're not one of us. Like, no, mate, you're here for the wrong reasons, right? You're not really that. And I would never deign to tell somebody who's trans that they're wrong when they say somebody else isn't really trans. Do you know what I'm saying? put it this way, right? Every time I speak to Claire, that's her name, right? About this kind of thing, she tells me, like, do you realize how rare trans people actually are? Like, it's shockingly rare how rare they are, right? Actual trans people with body dysphoria and all that kind of stuff, right? Gender dysphoria and all that. So most of the thousands and thousands of people you come across online and in real life probably aren't that. They have some other condition that's masquerading as them transitioning. You know what I mean? That isn't real. So when somebody says trans weirdo, I think that's what they mean, right? They mean somebody who's using the trans identity to cover up something else going on that's really fucking them up. That's my take on it anyway. But that's a straight white guy's take on it. Don't take it seriously, because, you know, I'm just giving you my 2 cents worth because you're watching the Northern Exile channel, and I'm Northern Exile. So there you go. Anyway, moving on. Chimera was a male and did not have gender dysphoria. So, New Morris, as we'll call him, is Morris becoming a thing? New Morris kept telling me that it was an insult to people who actually had gender dysphoria to portray changing gender without the accompanying mental condition. This was so stupid that at the time, I genuinely had no response for it. Several of the players Chimera was talking to, including my best friend who is also trans and the GM, were telling him that Chimera is a sci-fi character taking advantage of the technology of the setting to explore human perspectives, and it's really not that deep of a thing. Yeah, also, mate, did you pick up there that New Morris called it a mental condition? Right? Just, I got you. I caught you, right? You know? Lady doth protest too much, I think, right? We played a few sessions just fine. However, any time we were between jobs, shopping, or otherwise role-playing off the job, and the topic of Chimera changing race, sex, ethnicity would come up, New Morris would try to interrupt and move past it, or put down any conversations Chimera had about how fascinated he was by the differences in how he was treated when he was one of these people. He got to experience orc racism, female favoritism, ethnic community tribalism, and dwarven nepotism firsthand, since most people at a glance had no idea he was a shapeshifter. Alright, I'm going to say this. Number one, that's a really cool idea for a character, but I do think in role-playing a character like this, you're bringing in a lot of political things into the game that maybe wouldn't be there if you weren't playing that character. Do you know what I'm saying? You're experiencing dwarven nepotism, community tribalism, ethnic community tribalism, female favoritism, orc racism. You're experiencing these things not because they're happening in the world, but because your character is there. Do you know what I'm saying? And other players might get turned off by that. I'm going to be honest, I probably would be after a while. I would probably start rolling my eyes if your character comes in and we're going to have yet another anthropology lesson. You know, oh God, you know, can we just move on to actually roleplay here rather than having you go through this existential, oh wow, this is how black dwarves feel, oh, you know, that kind of a thing. If that was every week, I would find it tiring. I'm going to be honest. It's a really cool character idea, but maybe it's a bit much. Or were you trying to get under this guy's skin? I'm not sure. But anyway, moving on. At a few points, this actually helped me on the job. One instance, while modified to resemble an orc woman, Chimera was able to infiltrate a sort of orc power gang called the Sons of Sauron by flirting with a few members and basically pretending to be a harem girl. This sent New Morris off into a rant of trivializing the trans experience, treating it like a social power-up. Dude, unironically, he's literally just... Do you see what he's done there? He's literally outed himself. Do you see what he's done there? Treating the trans experience like a social power-up. That's literally what he's doing. I've got to send this to Claire, man. I've got to send it to her. Because she'd be like, yeah, that's it. That's literally it. You're treating being trans as a social power-up. That's literally it. You have no personality, Mr. Morris. You have no personality, so you tell everybody you're not a man anymore. That's... Dude. Pot kettle black. Lady doth protest too much. Once again, I was stunned, and my trans friend did not wait a second to reply, and I quote, well, Yeah, here we go. Well, you do kind of treat it like a social power-up yourself, you know? Unquote. Oh! The others laughed at this, and the GM once again had a chat with the new Morris about how it wasn't offensive or anything, and literally any other trans player at the table was almost the most engaged in chatting with Chimera about his observations on meta-human behaviour. Trust a trans girl to call this out, I'm just saying, do you know what I mean? You will know somebody who's actually a trans woman by how savage they are. You know, imagine having a guy's propensity to bust balls, you know, along with female bitchiness. Combine those two together. Right, you've now got your trans friend. It's hellish. Whenever somebody pisses them off. Anyway, while all this is going on, New Morris bogs down the games by engaging what I can only call Steven Universe behaviour, in which he tries to secure unrealistically happy and noble bright endings for every character, side story and subplot that we encountered. The Shadowrun missions intentionally come with a lot of dangling plot threads that are meant more to show the nature of the setting and how it happens around you, and yet New Morris kept grabbing every single thread and pulling at it in hopes of magically fixing the dystopian setting single-handedly, and this ended up consuming many of the GM's original runs that he had designed. Consequently, New Morris ended up quickly becoming the main character and appointing himself party leader, as if it was his bullshit that took over the plot lines. Jesus, dude. Jesus. If this is hard to follow, the prime example I remember was when we had to get a corporate technician from one megacorp to another. His current owners had him hooked on a drug that killed him if he stopped taking it, and our client in the adopting company did not know that. We only needed to keep him biologically alive to be handed off to the adopting company though. Chimera had these medical drugs that basically put him in stasis so he wouldn't die, and we planned to leverage the medical data on him and his addiction for more Nguyen at the handoff, when Mr. Johnson would be on the back foot and not have any room to try any bullshit on us. So Mr. Johnson is is what you call a client in this setting, and Nguyen or New Yen is our currency. New Morris, however, decided that this abuse of employees was intolerable, and it was our job as Shadowrunners not just to fight the corporations, but help the people oppressed by them. Whenever we would question the logic of trying to single-handedly fix a cyberpunk dystopia, New Morris would go on these long-winded lefty rants about workers' rights, corporate abuse, collective action, and class struggle. When we ignored New Morris's plan to try and rescue the guy we were paid to kidnap, he got all pissy and called us bigots, fascists, and corpo bootlickers. Yes, seriously. Fast forward a bit, and forget the context. However, Chimera is once again utilising his shape-shifting hobby to gain an advantage on infiltrating a place we were not supposed to be. By this point, we were playing our weekly missions with our webcams on so we could see who's trying to talk and spot problems with audio. During this, out of nowhere, New Morris holds up an X card and asks about skipping the scene. Dude... This is why we don't use lines and veils and safety tools. This is why we don't use them. Because the only people who use them are retards like this. Okay? I swear to God. I swear to God. Sorry for using the R word on those of you who find it offensive, but I don't much give a shit. You know? That's what they are. Okay? That's what they are. I'm stopping this make-believe game because I'm upset. Go fuck yourself. Get in the sea, as we say. We are all confused by this, because that is not a thing in the game. The GM tried to explain nice about it, and scurried along, and later on told me he was just as dumbstruck as I was, and was just trying to be polite because it took him by surprise. During another moment, we were just role-playing, and Chimera was in the vat, undergoing meta-transition and communicating via DNI. New Morris put up another X card. We all knew why, but he refused to elaborate when asked. He even did this to another player who was literally in the middle of an important character development moment, and I can only assume it was for political reasons since it didn't involve Chimera. And finally, the GM demanded an answer as to why he kept holding up this fucking card. Thankfully, when Hugh Morris did not elaborate, the scene just went on, but it was sullied by the scab rotting on our table. Yeah, this is now the GM's fault. The GM's fault. You should just ban this person. Like, listen, man, you clearly don't want to be here. Everything's triggering you. You need to go find another table. That's it, right? You know how you frame it? You say, listen, I'm now feeling bad as a GM because, you know, you're obviously not comfortable. So I'm not going to carry on this campaign unless you leave. Because I'm feeling really bad and I don't want to feel bad whilst I'm role-playing. Shadowrun is this kind of a setting, man, and it clearly isn't for you. So, you know, I respectfully am going to have to ask you to leave and find another table. I wish you all the best, though, and I really hope you find somewhere where, you know, you can have fun. But this ain't the place for you, and that's fine. It is one of those things. There's no hard feelings whatsoever, but, like, you know... I'm actively feeling bad now because I'm making you feel bad. Now, you're not really feeling bad, but that's how you frame it. If you want to get onto his side of empathy, quote unquote, but you know what's going to happen? You'll try the empathy thing, and because this guy has no real empathy, it's all performative, guys. It's all performative. This guy has no empathy. He'll say, that's disgusting, you know. He won't get it. He just won't get it. But at least you tried, and you can just then ban him. Do you know what I mean? Anyway. Finally, at one point, they flash the X card again for something involving Chimera. The GM demands why, and Hugh Morris talks about how I was trivializing the trans experience. Here we go again. The GM stated flatly, no, he isn't. Then Hugh Morris tried to go on about how trans people are really treated and not experiencing it is fake, since, and I quote, the struggle is a key component to being trans, and without it, you don't really understand what it's like to be another gender. The other players, including my trans friend, even started telling him how that's not how Shadowrun works. It is a full-on transhuman setting where body modding and gene editing are normal things that you can see all over the place. It led to the predictable circle, and finally, the GM decided to head to the bathroom. While this was happening, my trans friend is turning pink because she knows full well that these lunatics exist, the impression that they give off, and instill an unfortunately unreasonable suspicion in other gaming groups about who she is. I could look at her webcam and basically see her apologising to everybody using her eyes without a spoken word. Dude, okay, so last night, when I was in bed, I got up to the part where you were describing your character, and that's why I moved it forward, because I thought it was a really good idea. I had no idea about all this stuff. Like, that's horrible, and I've seen this. I've seen trans friends, like, apologise with their eyes to other friends, going, I'm sorry about this person. Right, I don't condone this person's behaviour. Do you know what I mean? That kind of a thing. Like, seriously. Horrible. She even told me later that anybody who focuses on the struggle deserves to be mocked. The trans ideal is for nobody to give a damn. Dude, I was literally about to say that before. Alright? Whenever I speak to, like, anybody who's of this persuasion, you know, who's becoming trans or is trans, they always say, nah, it's not a struggle. Right? You get idiots out there, but I am who I am, I don't give a fuck. Right? That's how they act. If you're rending your garments, going, it's such a struggle, everybody look at me. Yeah, no, odds are you're not trans. It's performative. Right? Just saying. Again, straight white guy, don't know anything about it, I can only tell you what my experience has been around these people. That's it. Now, the GM had a pattern I noticed over the months we played the game. Whenever he left, he hung up his headset and muted and deafened himself on Discord. With the webcams on, I could see him leave his headset behind as he stood. I got the idea to find this really offensive punk rock song and play it over my mic while the GM was away. I don't know if I can even write the name of it for you to read on YouTube, but trust me, it's quite rancid. Everybody goes wide-eyed and is shocked for a moment. Then they start laughing at how dumb the song actually is. Everybody, except, of course, New Morris. He was as offended as you can imagine. When the GM appeared on his webcam and reached for his headset, I quickly cut the song. New Morris began whining about it, and I denied any knowledge of it. The rest of the table immediately joined in and began saying they had no idea what New Morris was talking about. And the GM sighed and assumed this was more of New Morris's BS trying to belittle me / Chimera now that the X card has been stopped. Dude, this is... Alright, this is all passive aggressive. Like, you should just tell this person to fuck off, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, two wrongs don't make a right. You know what this is, right? And forgive me, Rob, but this is a group of lefty people taking the piss out of somebody who is even more, retardedly far left, right? This is how lefty people solve a problem. Passive aggressiveness, right? You don't just solve the issue. And by the way, people on the far right do this as well, right? Literally, people who have their political leanings take over their minds. This is how they act. Okay, don't do shit like this, Rob. All right, be like a normal person. Tell this person to fuck off. Simple. Say, listen, GM, we need to have a talk about this person while they're in the room. Don't be bitchy while they're in the room. I don't think you belong here, man. I'm feeling really bad for you. You're not having a good time. I think we need to move on without you. Simple as. It sucks, but it has to be done. Do you know what I mean? This is really like passive aggressive and like mean spirited. And I know the guy deserves it. I know that. But like, it's lame. It's lame as fuck. That's just my opinion. Just my opinion. This is the kind of thing. I've got a friend who does shit like this. Who goes out of his way to like. It's too easy. Do you know what I'm saying? It's too easy to annoy this person and make them look bad. So if you actually put effort into it, that's even more lame. Do you know what I'm saying? I've got a friend of mine who does this as well. It's not really a friend anymore, but you know what I mean? Like, it just annoys me. It's like, dude. No. Anyway. New Morris whined about us pulling a prank on him and ganging up on him. Well, he's kind of right. In this last bit, he's kind of right. And we just sat quietly and let the GM tell him to stop. This set New Morris off on his long sob story that made me think of Wreck-It Ralph. In that movie, there's a joke about a character who has the most tragic backstory scientifically possible, and New Morris just kept going and making up tragic occurrences to earn pity and make it sound like he was being bullied and should be spoiled or something. Everybody knew he was talking out of his ass when he got to his third instance of child issues and crypto-trans violence before they realised they were trans, but were being attacked for it anyway. When the GM stood up again to handle something, I saw New Morris's pink face and immediately figured I had been muted or something. So I just PM'd the song link over to Trans Friend and, without any other words from me, she began playing it into a mic to annoy New Morris. Again. The end of the story is lame as fuck. Right, this has been a really good Hobby Nightmare, and it still is a really good Hobby Nightmare. But the end of this story is lame as fuck. Like, you've stooped to his level, man. Is what you've done. This is a group of left-leaning people picking on somebody who is even more retardedly far left. Just saying. Been around them enough to know. This is how they act. This is Reddit. This is some Reddit-level bullshit right here. Like, play this song, ding. And then we all say that we didn't do it. That kind of a thing. And that wasn't enough to make New Morris leave. Dude, you should... Okay, I've said it before. You should have just said, leave. You didn't need to do all of this. Listen, it would have been far less cruel for you to just say, listen, mate, as I've just said, you're getting annoyed. This isn't for you. I'm gonna save you the trauma and just say, listen, you shouldn't play in this game, right? We're going to leave the call now and go start a call somewhere else. I hope you find somewhere that's good for you, but this isn't the place for you, right? That would be traumatic for them, but at least it's a clean break, right? You've been kind, clean break, kill them with kindness, goodbye, off you go, right? You still got rid of the cancer, you still got rid of it, gone, right? What you've done is you've taken what should be you know, an hour or two of bad feelings, and you've ruined this person's entire week, basically. Do you know what I mean? You've literally thrown them to the floor and then laid the boot in whilst they're down for a good, solid while. And there's a reason punching down isn't worth it. Do you know what I'm saying? And people can have a go at me for standing up for this person. Listen, New Morris in the story is the dickhead. Don't get me wrong, right? But the way it's been dealt with is also passive-aggressive beta shit. And shouldn't be done. Anyway. This was enough to make New Morris leave. We finished that session, and one more to round off the story arc, but sadly, the GM ended up pulling the plug since he was struggling to handle the game so large and clunky. New Morris had somewhat dampened the whole thing, and apparently, New Morris sent the GM a long wall of text ranting about everything you can imagine, which just made him tired. Thankfully, GM still runs smaller games of Shadowrun, just better managed for scale and length, typically 3 to 5 players and 8 to 10 sessions. I don't want you to think he got bullied away from GMing by New Morris. Sorry for being light on details, but I'm drawing on something that happened during lockdown when I played a lot of tabletops with Discord friends. I hope it was entertaining, a read, and happy gaming. Rob. Alright, Rob, well, cheers, thank you very much for that, man. Please don't take anything that I said as like a personal insult. It's just literally, you know, you're in the right for a good 95% of this hobby nightmare. It's only the end there where everyone started dogpiling the guy and like going down to his level, or maybe even worse, and I'm like, okay, yeah, you know, it's hypocritical, is what it is. It's hypocritical. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed that batch of Hobby Nightmares. I'll be back tomorrow with some more 40k rantage. What are we ranting about tomorrow? Let me have a little look-see here. What am I ranting about tomorrow? It is... are Chaos even the main villains? Yes, there we go. We're going to examine whether Chaos are the main villains anymore. I would argue they're probably not, but we'll see tomorrow. I love you a long time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll speak to you soon. Have a good one. Bye now.